Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of 5 Facts. I'm Tony Southcott and today we're here to talk about The Witch. Came out in 2015, had a bigger release in 2016. This Robert Eggers Puritan horror movie is awesome. I know there's a lot of people that are going to be a bit contentious. There's even people that don't think that this is a horror movie. But I really think it is, and I think that they did a fantastic job with it. So, we're going to be talking a lot of spoilers. Buckle up, let's get to the facts. Fact number 1. There's a pretty explicit reason why these children were sacrificed, and it's pretty messed up. Within a few minutes of the movie's start, we see Samuel basically abducted by the witch, and it's very heavily implied that she killed him to get the blood and fat. The reason for this is that traditionally it took unbaptized babies, usually male, and their fat to be boiled down along with hemlock and a bunch of other herbs and plants to make it so that witches could fly. Either they would put it on their broom or they would put it all over themselves. One of the more twisted things about this movie that a lot of people miss is that at a certain point, we don't see the two twins anymore. Basically, Anya Taylor Joy wakes up, she's surrounded by dead goats, and the twins are gone. Most people think that this is because the actual end ritual that is being performed by the witches is them turning these two twins into this sort of ointment that allows them to fly, especially as we see everybody flying up in that particular scene. It also seems to have some sort of arousal thing, but that might just be part of the whole ritual in itself. This makes it even more twisted because Thomasin is probably going to be bathing in the blood of her brother and sister. Fact number 2. There are times where they show that the crops were affected by a mold called ergot, which may have been the same thing that caused the problems of the Salem witch trial. Ergot is a fungal infection that takes over crops, usually rye, but a lot of other cereal-type crops. It's highly hallucinogenic, and actually it was some of the alkaloids from this that are where LSD came from in the first place. We can see that their farm has a lot of this fungus on it, and they talk about it multiple times, that their corn is trash, that they're not able to trade the way they need to be able to survive the winter because of this harvest. Now, think about it. If you were forced to eat this, and you didn't make the connection that this corn or this mold was why all of a sudden you were completely tripping, that you were a teetotaling, Puritan, pious person that was dedicated entirely to their Lord and Savior, and all of a sudden you start hearing voices, you start seeing things, you start having desires that you have repressed, that you're all of a sudden faced with things that you can't even fathom. That would be absolutely terrifying, and it's no wonder that they blamed witchcraft for this sort of thing. In a lot of ways, taking LSD is about as close to seeing real witchcraft as you're gonna get. The events of this movie take place about 60 years before the actual Salem witch trials, and I think that this was a pretty cool way to do a precursor to that. There are hints that this movie could actually be entirely psychological, that they're kind of setting it up so that this is things that they're seeing, but Robert Eggers has said that it's probably supernatural. They just wanted to have a few clues that it could have been something natural, or it could be a combination of the two. Fact number 3. Most of the folklore in this film comes directly from the mid-1600s. Before we get into the other folklore, the family in this film is actually a very Calvinist Christian family. They're even more hardcore than a lot of the Puritans were. At least that's the story we're told at the beginning of this film. Calvinists were big on predestination, which basically said that those that knew God before will know him again, and so on. So it's basically saying that you are predestined to go to heaven no matter what you do, or you're predestined to go to hell no matter what you do. Either way, you're a sinner in the hand of an angry God. As far as the more mystical symbols, we're talking about like rabbits, which they've always been fairly mystical. They've always been fertility idols and so on. But at this period in time, rabbits were looked at as mystical and often as wards for witches. They were specifically known as milk hares because they would come and steal the spoiled milk from farms. Also, there were a lot of people that believed that these witches would inhabit the bodies and kind of ward into them, or just turn completely into them so that they could spy on other people. It is believed that those who have entered in with a pact with Satan are unable to finish the Lord's Prayer, which is why the two twins fall over in the middle of Caleb's death scene. They're trying to join their parents in saying it, but as they get deeper into the prayer, they both just collapse and hit the ground and start screaming. That is believed to be because they are either in a pact with Satan or Black Phillip, or they might be experiencing some aspects of possession themselves. And this one's a little bit weirder. Witches were believed to have the witch's teat, which was basically a blemish or a different type of teat that would allow them to milk, or it would allow them to produce milk for their wards and their animals, which is actually alluded to whenever we see Catherine basically getting pecked at by the crow. There are people that believe that she actually accepted the book just out of desperation and signed away her soul as well, but I didn't see a whole lot of evidence for that. If that's something you've thought about, throw it in the comments. Fact number 4. The language the witches are heard chanting is Enochian. Enochian is supposed to be an angelic language that was used and developed by Dr. John Dee and Edward Kelly in the 16th century. So in the 1500s, they believed that they were given this language from angels that were telling them how to basically create rituals, make healing talismans, and make all sorts of other things. While it's not known if John Dee or Kelly actually practiced any of this, we know they researched and created them. Later, it was discovered by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn occultist group, and they decided to just kind of run with it. They would go on to use those rituals, they would go on to use the supposed wisdom that came from these books in their occult practices. These were also further made popular by everyone's favorite magician, Aleister Crowley. Specifically, if you want to know what they're chanting in The Witch, it is the 11th Enochian key, which is a funerary song meant to bring the dead forward and bind their souls to earth. So I'm not sure who they were binding here, but it is a pretty interesting thought. Like, are they actually binding her to earth? Are they binding the children that they sacrificed? There's a lot of different things that could be going on there. Fact number 5, popcorn facts. Sometimes I can't find a giant fact, so I just go and grab a bunch of really cool little ones. If the movie seemed short, it's because they had more scenes with Black Phillip, but the goat himself was not very well trained for this movie. They weren't able to do all that they wanted to. Apparently the horses and some of the other animals were pretty cooperative, though. This is just a personal suggestion, but if you watch this movie again, check it out with subtitles. There's a lot of flowery language here, and a lot of times where I miss things, and if I didn't have the closed captioning on there, it would have just been completely lost. Also, it is streaming on Amazon Prime as of right now. Most of the language is taken directly from books of the era, as well as a lot of puritanical writings. The reason why there are 2 V's instead of a W on the Witch poster is because W actually wasn't used that often at this point in time. Later, they would end up using it a lot more, but at this point, it was just a V and a V. And Eggers ended up taking this directly from a pamphlet in the 1600s from Massachusetts. The Satanic Temple has actually endorsed this movie. Jex Blackmore, the spokesman for the Satanic Temple, has actually said that they put on showings and everything else because it's an impressive presentation of satanic insight that will inform contemporary discussion of the religious experience. So, I don't know if that's a compliment to the filmmakers or if that's just really weird, but the Satanic Church is all about this movie. There's something about The Witch that's so alluring to me, and maybe it's Anya Taylor Joy in her first movie being absolutely brilliant as Thomasin. Maybe it's the language, maybe it's the mood, because they used only natural lighting. But I absolutely love the way this movie is made, and watching it for a second time was even better than the first. I've sat through a lot of movies that I thought were good for this series and for various others, and they didn't turn out to be as good. This one was way better the second time. And a lot of it comes down to the slow fall of Thomasin. Like, we watch a prideful father who's unwilling to defend his daughter, who is willing to basically let her sit on the hook for his sins of selling the silver cup, who is saying that she's so much of a problem because she's turning into a beautiful young woman that they're going to basically sell her off to another family because the temptation on his firstborn son is getting too strong. And this is all about repression. This is about, like, them just pushing her further and further and further down. The first part of the movie, we see that she's very apologetic and she wants to be saved, but she still has all these thoughts of sin and she still has everything going in her own mind against her. She sees the way her mom looks at her. She sees the way her dad loves her but can't quite make the connections he needs to. And there's a lot here that is very, very interesting about oppression. And I love the way that they did this. And you watch as everything slowly turns and she gets blamed for the deaths of the children and she gets blamed for everything, even though none of this is actually her fault. Slowly, everything just falls so far apart that she has no way but to just go the full distance and turn herself over. A lot of people actually put that as a criticism of the movie. Like, if she just had her family murdered, why would she fall in with these witches? I mean, she didn't really have much choice. Choice 1, stay on the farm and starve to death. Choice 2, go back to town covered in blood and hope that they actually take you in and believe you whenever you say that your entire family was killed by supernatural forces and not try to hang you. You already have a big enough reputation for that as it is because you're a beautiful woman in a plain society that does not value any of that. And also being a pariah to begin with. She also had these ideas of vanity that she still wanted. She remembered the glass windows. She remembered better food. She remembered England far more than she loved this life where she was just basically a maid to her parents. So these small offerings, whenever Black Phillip offers her butter, a clean dress, and to live deliciously, are enough whenever she's got nothing left and she would probably die any other way for her to just turn her back on her family. And I thought that this was an absolutely amazing performance and done by a director who I'm really looking forward to seeing his next work. I know that Eggers is doing The Lighthouse next, which is supposed to have Anya Taylor Joy, Willem Dafoe, and I think Robert Pattinson, so we'll see how all that turns out. Anyway, I hope you guys have an excellent week. If you enjoy these videos, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/humanechoes. Otherwise, just give us a like, a share, a comment. Let me know what you thought of The Witch below. Do you think it's horror? Did you enjoy it? Was it a little bit too much of a slow burn? Please put it in the comments below. Have an excellent week, and we will see you soon.